There we go. Slide on your reading.
All right. They said because we didn't have anything items, I can extend my talk on Revelations. Okay. Imagine you've been caught in a storm and you can't stop the rain that's pelting down. You can't stop the wind that's absolutely blowing a huge gale. There are branches falling down all around you, and you're trying to head in a direction. There. You can't control the weather. It doesn't matter how much you yell at that storm, it's probably not going to change what's happening and what's happening around you. We can't control what happens, like the storm, we can't control what happens around us all the time. We can't control the people who are around us and what they do, regardless of how much it irritates us. Often there's very little that we can do about the way they are. We can't control the outcomes, the things that happen in our lives. Sometimes they are pure luck, sometimes they're just circumstance, and sometimes they're just things that happen. Sometimes there are things, sometimes people pass away, and sometimes people suffer from cancer, and have massive accidents. And sometimes things just happen. And we can't control that. It's like the wind in that storm that we're in. It doesn't matter how much we shake our fist at it, it doesn't matter how much we yell at it, it doesn't matter how much we want it to change. It's happening in and around us. And we find ourselves, it's nothing but past events. This stuff that may happen in our life, or happen to somebody in our family, which is horrific. And we can't control a lot of those things. And we can't take them and change them. Sometimes they just are. And there are times in our life when we need to accept that you are not in control. Who are the other control freaks out there besides me? But thank you for the honest people in the pastors including my wife. You can imagine how well that goes to control freaks in a marriage. It's awesome. You are not in control. And the sooner we accept that in our lives, the happier that we will be. The sooner we are able to accept that, you know what, some things just happen. And that we didn't play a part on it, and there's nothing you can do to control it. It just is. Some things are just luck in our lives. Some things I think we try and claim that we have responsibility over, and really you look back and just go, do you know what, I just got lucky. And these things happen as a result. Other things are just like, do you know, there's just dumb luck. Sometimes things just, you know, a tree falls over and flips somebody. That isn't, it's nothing that people can do to change that. It just sometimes happens. And there's how much, when we accept that we don't have control over everything, and that, you know, that there's stuff in our life that happens that just will happen. And honestly, there are times where we fight for control, because we feel as though that control brings a certainty in our life. I'll speak for myself, and then I feel that sometimes I've had this, and I can do this, I can do that I feel like it brings some sort of certainty in my life sometimes. And for me, that often brings a sense of peace. I know where I am, and I know what I'm doing. But there are things that life just happens sometimes and can bump you off the road. And you know in your own life there's different things that have happened in your life that have sent you astray. And you've gone, do you know what, that's not something I was expecting. I don't know. It wasn't something that happened as a result of actions I took. It just happened. And much of life can be outside of our control. And we're striving often to control things. It leads to anxiety, it leads to frustration in our lives, because we don't want things to happen, but they have. Peace comes from acknowledging that God is in control. And He's the one that controls the outcomes. And the only thing that we ever need to be in control of is ourselves. Not others, not other people, not our circumstances, but just we're in control of the way often that we react to things that happen in our lives. And we're in control of the way that we react to different circumstances that we find ourselves in, the attitudes and the behaviours that we enact as a result of what comes along in our life. Problems start to focus when we focus on what we can't control. What we can control are our thoughts, and our attitudes, and our values, and our actions, and our efforts, and our responses to those things that come up in our life. There may have been a real sickness that has happened to you or to a member of your family. And there's nothing that you can do about that other than control the way that you react to it, the way that you handle that situation, and the love, the attention, and the care that you can deliver in those circumstances. You can choose to impact you in a really poor way, that it can really bring about anxiety for you and a sense of unrest. Or you can accept the fact that it's happening, that God has the outcome in control. And what I can control is the way that I handle the situation, what I can bring to it with those around me, the way that I can shine through in this, that the Spirit can shine through in me. The storm can't be stopped a lot of times in our lives. It will happen. But you can choose how you respond to it. You can put on a jacket, you can seek shelter, you can adjust your direction. It's not often in our lives, and you would have heard this before, so it's not so much what happens in our lives, but what happens to you as a result of that happening. What steps you take, what decisions you make as a result of those things. Because they can lead you down a path of anxiety, stress, and worry, and depression, or it can lead you on a path of character growth. That you can find, you know what, these times have been sent as more of a time for me to be able to learn and to challenge who I am. I get to find out what my values are, what my core beliefs are. And a lot of you will know part of my testimony is the fact that I was diagnosed with cancer some 15 years ago. And to the shock of no one out there, I can't cure cancer. But what I could do, what I had a choice of doing, was how I react to that in the assistance that I could give to Vicky. And to be honest, Vicky was completely in control of that, the way that she thought about it, and that she knew that God was going to be there throughout all of this with her book. I could have gone down the path of being quite dark about it, quite depressed about it, and being anxious and stressed over it. Neither Vicky or I did that, but more so rested in the fact that, you know what, this is a period where we're going to grow closer to God. This is a period where we're not in control of the outcome that God is, but we are in control of the attitude that we take towards it and to the response to the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And no one here is immune to being in a situation where something quite shocking or quite unexpected happens in your life. And if you haven't been in that situation, you will be at some point. without saying what it was, have a range of hands in here of people who've been in a situation where you've gone, that is completely unexpected, it's totally out of the blue, and I really wasn't sure how I was ever going to handle that again. Yeah, and I reckon the other half of you just don't like putting your hand up. You will be. And there's choices that we make in which way we head with this. And we can either use it as a time where we take it as an opportunity to grow in who we are as Christians, in the values that we have, the beliefs that we have, and who we are and who we represent through Christ. Fighting the storm won't make it any better. Shaking your fist at it and yelling at the storm, to my knowledge, does not change the storm. But we can set our sail to ensure that we blows us in the direction that we want to go in. I'm not a sailor, but I love the fact that those that do can adjust according to the way the wind is blowing. Provided the wind is blowing, then they can adjust what they do on there to still head in the direction that they want to go. Wisdom is being able to adjust our sails and not shout at the sky. Accepting that you're not in control isn't a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength. It's not a sign of being passive about it. It's a sign of accepting that, do you know what, I can stay calm under pressure because I know who is in control. I know it's not me in this circumstance that I find myself in. I know, but I know who is. This gives you some opportunity to be able to focus on what we're doing and how we're handling it, and not actually the result. There's going to be circumstances in people's lives where, in the end, it didn't turn out the way that we wanted it to. And accepting that we don't have control over the outcome. And that's okay, because God does. And He is far wiser, far more generous, far more loving and kind than anything we can ever come up with. And we know that His plan is the plan that we need to follow rather than our own. When we accept that we can't control everything, it's going to put us in a much more emotionally stable position. We shouldn't need to worry or concern ourselves about those things that we can't control. And we have to focus only on those that we can. We can make clearer and wiser decisions when we start to make and understand that we can only control those things that we can control. And that is the way that we act, the way that we speak about things, the decisions that we make. We can't control the way that somebody else thinks about us, the way what they do in these circumstances. We can only control who we are, the way that we react sometimes to what happens to us. And the outcome is what the outcome is. That's God's domain and not ours. Life will always be unpredictable. I just want to talk through what the Bible teaches us in these circumstances. And it teaches us that we are responsible for obedience. God has called us to be obedient servants, to be followers of His word. We're not called to control all that happens around us, but God is responsible for the results. This is important in two ways, because sometimes we think about, I don't know why that happens, but I know God does. And I trust Him in those circumstances. It's important from the other aspect as well, and that, sometimes things go really well for us. And who's the first one we praise when that happens? Ourselves. We think about how good we are in those circumstances, and these are the reasons why these things went so well. And it's on the good and it's on the bad. We need to be to accept that we can't control everything, and we let go of what those results are. And praise God, either way, knowing that He has control over it all. James 4, I'll ask you to turn to for a quick. James 4 and verse 13. scripture you will know well. Doesn't read like I want to read. No, yes, it does, because I was reading chapter 3. That's all good. James 4, verse 13. Go to now, ye that say, today or tomorrow we'll go into such a city, and continue there a year, and buy and sell and get grain. Whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow, or what is your life. It is even a vapour that appeareth for a little time, and then vanisheth away. For ye ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live, and do this or that. It's a scripture that reminds us that, we can make plans, we can look to do this, and do this, and do this. But in humility, we need to recognise, do you know what? At the end of the day, God controls the outcome. We control our choices, but God controls the outcome. He's asked us for obedience in the choices that we make, in the way that we handle those things that come up in our lives, and the way that we live our lives and interact with others. He's given us some clear guidance as to the love and kindness and generosity that we show one another, as to what we do when certain circumstances arise in our life. He's asked us to be obedient around those directions as to the way that we live our lives. But at the end of the day, God controls the outcomes. We need to separate ourselves from the fact that we don't control it all. And that's liberating for us, because it means it can free us from the worry and anxiety that we often place upon. If it's not this outcome, if it's not this result, woe is me. In the world will fall apart and all will be wrong. We need to understand it's God who controls that outcome, it's not us. And the more that we lean into that, the more that frees us from that concern and the anxiety that plays upon us. In Matthew 6, I won't go and get you to turn to it, but in Matthew 6, 27 to 33, it talks about not worrying. That worry changes nothing, that seeking God first brings peace. And knowing that it is He, and not our skill, not our ability, not who we are, who brings us to a place free from anxiety and stress. Joseph is a great example. In Genesis 50, verse 20, for those who want to write it down, he explained to his brothers when he finally met up with his brothers when he was the second in command of Egypt, and he was explaining to them, you know, I know you meant it for harm, but God meant it for good. But God had a plan throughout all this circumstance. He knew throughout all the different things that were happening to him, that all these things, honestly, they went wrong, and it went right, and they went wrong, and it went right, and it went wrong, until it finally got into a position where he could save his family and he could save his home and save the nation. And God was putting him and working him to a position where he could have a major impact upon God's family, upon his family in Israel and the future of Israel. And sometimes we need to accept that, you know, there's a process and a path that God is leading us along. That our part in it is being that faithful servant throughout. Not turning our eye away from what God wants us to be and what He wants us to do in those circumstances that come upon us. Because if Joseph could have turned around a number of times and gone, I'm done. We're done, God. Too many things have gone wrong. But he didn't. He kept to who he was, and he knew who God was, and he knew ultimately that God was in control. That God loved him and cared for him, and he had a plan that was far greater than anything that he could come up with himself. Job obviously is another great one, that God gives and God takes. Regardless of the situation that Job found himself in, he was an incredibly wealthy man and he lost it all. He wasn't prepared to condemn God, regardless of the instruction that his friends and his wife had given him. If he first got to die, he said, no, I know who my God is, and I stay faithful to him, regardless of the circumstances that I find myself in. But we can often find ourselves in circumstances of that storm, and then whatever that storm might be in our lives, those winds will blow, the rain melts down, and we find ourselves exposed to all the different things that are coming against us. But acknowledging that we can choose to a different path, we can choose a path that sets us on one that, I'm faithful to where I'm headed and what I'm doing. And God has me in this circumstance, and He controls this outcome. It's not I, it's not me. All I can do is choose to be faithful to Him and to be obedient to His words, to His direction, His guidance on how to react to what is going on, how to act in this situation that we find ourselves in. Paul talked about in Philippians about being content in all circumstances. He found himself in a range of different things that went on in his life. Huge differences to the shipwrecks that he had, and being in prison and all this sort of stuff. And he could either be taken upon himself that, woe is me, I can't. He could think about how he could control these circumstances and what he had to do and what he had to change in order to make this different. Or he could acknowledge the fact that, I'm on this path, that God has me, that He takes me by the hand in these circumstances. I'm here simply to be obedient to Him, because He will guide me and keep me throughout all. Proverbs 3 verse 5 to 6, it's a popular one for me. I'll read it out. Proverbs 3. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct thy paths. That's what accepting that we're not in control looks like. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, lean not to thine own understanding. What happens when we lean to our own understanding and we try to take control in these circumstances? It's when the worry and the stress and the anxiety and what I need to do and how will I react to this and how do I change that person, what do I need to do, and how can I be involved here and probably go step them up and get too involved. I was having a conversation this morning with somebody, and they just recognised the fact that in circumstances they actually had to take a step back and allow God in. Rather than trying to be that person who's the change agent and what I need to do and how I need to fix this, they recognise the fact that, I need to take a step back and be less involved and allow God to move in the circumstances. And accept the fact that it's He that controls the outcome in this, not us. 1 Peter 5, verse 6. Just another scripture around what accepting the fact that we're not in control is like. Chapter 5 verse 6, it says, humble yourselves therefore under the mighty hand of God, that He may exalt you in due time. Cast all your care upon Him, for He careth for you. Acceptance is surrender. It's not a weakness, it's a surrender of your control over God. So many times we want to be a part of it, and we want to manipulate, we want to change, we want to channel things in this particular direction. But we're relying on ourselves and our own wisdom sometimes in order to do that. And at times we just need to be able to step back and go, do you know what? I need more of God involved in this and less of me. I need to surrender any sort of control or any sort of direction that I'm trying to put on it, I just need to put myself in a position where I'm just being obedient to what God has asked me to do. And to accept the fact that, God ultimately has his hand upon this. The question I'll ask you to think about as I hop off here is, what is really in my control? What can you control in your life, really? It's not your wife, and it's not your husband. Ultimately, what they do, what they choose to do is ultimately up to them. You can choose the way that you react. You can choose the way that you speak, the actions that you take, the reactions that you have. That's what you control. What somebody does and how that impacts you is also your choice. You can choose to be negatively impacted by that, or you can choose to, do you know what? That's a choice they're making. It's my choice as to whether I decide how I am impacted by what they have done. In Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." Be still and know that God is in control. When we can be still, when we can bring ourselves to a place of peace with spiced ginger beer in our hand, that's when we know that we're in a good spot, that God is in control of our lives. That we can be peaceful about that, in knowing when we look ahead, it's not so much what I have to do, what I have to control, or what these things are, and what impact I can have here or there. It's accepting that, you know what, that's God's domain as to what the outcome is. My domain is simply, am I obedient to what God has asked me to do? And the way that I speak to people, the way that I act around them. God never promised control to us. He promised his presence, that he would be there to turn to throughout. Our part is just to be faithful and obedient to his word. And
Anything else for us? Some great scriptures there, some simple ones too. Just my Lord with all your heart, lean not unto your own understanding. Cast all your cares upon him, so he cares for you. It's good to have some of these memory ones that are in your head that you need to regurgitate when you need to tell them to yourself.